Welcome to the American Small Business League podcast. I am Bruce DeTorres. With me is Michael Faris, running for Senate in Kentucky. He is a native of Elizabethtown, Kentucky, not a career politician. He's worked with his hands his entire life, started as a young man working on his family's hay and tobacco farm, learning the values of hard work, discipline, and integrity. And then he built a successful career in aviation and owns a small helicopter maintenance business, proving that the American dream is still achievable. Really great to get to know you today, Michael. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, sir. How are you?
Great, thank you. We sent you a letter describing the mission of our organization, which is to shine light on a real scandal, a real problem, a real ripoff at the federal government, particularly at the hands of the Small Business Administration. And you replied to talk about that. I'm most interested, as interested in you and your candidacy. Why are you running? So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and what made you throw your hat in the ring?
Yes, sir. No worries. One of the biggest things obviously has been just the absolute overreach of the federal government into the Americans' way of lives. Um, my interest in the Senate race started probably um, about mid-COVID. A lot of people don't agree with the situation that I'm in, but ultimately, I can't wear a mask all the time. So what I did is I went to a doctor in New York. His name is Russell Sorosky. He gave me a mask exemption. He is a triple board certified neurologist. And in my line of work, I travel in the airlines, usually anywhere from 3 to 4 times a month. And I can't don a mask for those long periods of times, going from, say, Kentucky to California, which is where most of my business is predominantly done. So anyway, I tried to follow the rules and give that mask exemption to the airlines. And the airlines, who are obviously not my doctors, told me that my disability did not qualify to be exempt from the mask exemption, when clearly in the CDC mandate and the TSA security directive, it gave clear exemptions to be able to fly mask free in both of those documents that were handed down from, not only the CDC, which is, you know, an organization that can only recommend, right? It is the TSA security directive, which is a component of the Patriot Act that gives them the ability to just make law out of nowhere. With that being said, because the only other course of redress was to file DOT complaints. I filed more than 13 of those. And if you want any idea of how your government is working for you as people, we're now almost 5 years separated from the initial filings of the DOT complaints. And to this day, I've heard no word from that three letter agency. So to me, that is a problem. There should never be a point where the federal government is coming in and giving rules for us to abide by. And then when we try to abide by them, it being more than 5 years before I get answers. So in the height of COVID, I sued the TSA. The very next day, they placed me on a terrorist watch list, believe it or not. So I had to file a motion in that Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals to be removed from that watch list. Now, granted, I was removed from it because I think the judge had seen, hey, this guy's not a terrorist. Like, this is a little bit of a red flag. We can't do this. So once they removed me from that list, we obviously trailed that case through its normal course. And because it is a Court of Appeals case, the only redress there is for agency change. Now, there was another gentleman in DC who had filed a mask litigation case before me, and several of my coalition members, because there were several mass cases that we all separately filed amongst the states in those appeals courts. So mind you, this has all been done pro se without counsel. But this guy, that's basically what he does, is he sues the TSA almost every day. So he got handed a bunch of judges in DC that obviously was not for helping us get through this battle. We obviously lost that case. So then we went on to sue the CDC and five major airlines which refused me service. That case is still active in the Western District of Kentucky with a judge named Ben Beaton. So for me, if you want a clear answer as to why I want to run for Senate, it is to basically go after a constitutional amendment for these judges because they are absolutely rogue in their rulings against either party, whether it be Republican or Democrat. And I think the biggest problem with that is um, you have, the president appointing those judges, and so they can't be removed by the people, and they're not elected by the people. And with Congress the way that it operates now, it would seem that both sides of the aisle are semi-corrupted to some degree, and they are going to vote on whoever they think is a friendly to their thing, not to the American people. You know, these judges aren't ruling on law, and any laws that most of the time are made, or any judgments that are handed down, are predominantly more ruled on case law than actual constitutional law. So, for instance, in the CDC case that I have, we charged them with like 37 counts of violations, most of which were state law and constitutional violations. Now, 35 of the 37 were shot down because they were preempted by some other 3 to 4 letter law that had been just created out of thin air through Congress to protect, say, the big corporation, the FAA, the airline industry, you name it. So you couldn't charge them with basically hindering your right to travel among the free states in the most opportune way, right? Because my job, I can't just get in a car and drive to California and be efficient in what I do. So I rely on airline transportation. So that mode of transportation is pretty much like it is a necessary means to what I do. Well, I can't charge them with, thwarting my ability to fly among the free states without a mask, right? Because they're saying, oh, well, all of that is, let's say, preempted by some other law that has been created by a batch of politicians who have taken whatever donor money to pass these laws, and the American people don't even know about it. Now, the interesting thing about what I've dealt with, having to go through all the case law and do all of this pro se with no legal counsel, I've had the opportunity to read some of this stuff and realize that it's not just the airlines. It's quite frankly a large portion of our daily lives that the American people don't even know exist against them. And the only time they will find out is when it is absolutely used against them. And then when they try to fight it, there's some caveat or some preempted thing or, whatever the case may be, that keeps them from getting a redress for their grievances as the Constitution allows. So, and then beyond, the rogue judgeship, obviously the COVID era policies, I think, were pretty restrictive on people. I think forcing anyone to be vaccinated or vaccinate their children or force them into a certain thing in school to learn all of these odd ways that are just not an American way of life. Definitely not good for us. Another thing that I think obviously is, the healthcare. Right now you have Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, you have United Healthcare and Centene, all three of those major conglomerates who are absolutely basically price gouging the American people for medical insurance, most of which is not guaranteed renewable. And so right now what we've missed out on is a 2017 era, what a lot of people call Trump care, but it was called the American Health Care Act, right? That allowed for individuals to invest in themselves through HSAs. And so not only that, there were catch-up provisions that were double what you see today for individuals who are 55 years or older. And, if we want to return this society to a libertarian society, we as a people have to basically start moving forward on our own merit. There is no situation at this point where the federal government is going to be here to save you in any manner. Anything that they tell you that they want to give you, especially if they call it free, I can guarantee you've already paid too much money for it. And if you have not, I can assure you that your child will. So, also another thing, which is why I'm speaking with you today, is the fact that small businesses are struggling. And it was a large part due to COVID because when it came about, they told all the small businesses they had to basically sink or swim. And then, of course, they did hand out all of the paycheck protection money, the CARES Act or whatever, which interestingly enough is the catch 22 in my CDC lawsuit because they accepted federal funding. And that was one of the two counts that stuck in that lawsuit that is allowing this to get past the motion to dismiss stage. As a pro se litigant against five major airlines and, of course, the CDC, which the CDC has been dropped from the case at this time because the injury is no longer current, right? But those five airlines, there was a retroactive harm, right? So we're not only going for the policy change, which is going to be basically amending the ACAA, where they've told us or tried to tell us that basically a lot of what we try to charge them with, we cannot charge them with those claims because there is no quote unquote private right of action as an individual to sue an airline because the ACAA has what they call a statutory scheme in place, which is where you'll file a DOT complaint and then the DOT investigates it with the airline. And if the DOT feels like that their actions were egregious enough, the DOT can accept money on your behalf to the government. So what kind of scheme is that? You know, and then not only that, you know, you file these DOT complaints and they don't get back with you. So then you go to, let's say, the Court of Appeals, you sue the DOT as well. And there's been many cases that have went up in front of the Court of Appeals where they said, hey, the DOT is failing to act. And the Court of Appeals simply states, there's nothing we can do about it. So there is no statutory scheme in place. So that opens the door for a private right of action, right? Whether they believe based on some 1958 law or not, that you can or cannot sue an airline as a private citizen. The fact that they are not acting upon the statutory scheme that they've set in place, there is a private right of action because there is some redress that needs to be had and accountability that needs to be had. So there's a large portion of it. That's why I'm running for Senate. I'm really over this idea of the federal government reaching into your home, whether that be your family or your next of kin from your close family, your children's schooling, your daily life, your mode of travel. It doesn't matter. These things have to be amended. I also believe that we should be putting in term limits so that these congressmen and senators cannot be up there thwarting and squandering the taxpayer dollar and doing it for 40 to 50 years at a time. As a matter of fact, the seat I'm running for currently is held by Mitch McConnell, who's been there as long as I've been alive. That is not a good way of life, So definitely some of the main things for me to run for Senate.
Thank you.
Obviously being reached weekly by folks who have, ideas, and that's actually good. That's what we want. We want folks who have real issues to contact us and say, hey, this is something that seat can address. And, we'll look at the information and hopefully as long as it's, an America First policy, be more than glad to push that for anyone in the state or even the nation.
I really was impressed by your website. Really, really impressed. And I have a deep communications and marketing and sales experience, Mike. So I was really impressed by your website for the simplicity of it, how one can read on it. And for the record, your site is farisforsenate.com, Faris for Senate.com. So I encourage Kentuckians to check it out. And even people who want to see what does Bruce think an effective website is to check it out. And you have a formidable challenge. Is there a primary between now and November 26th?
Yeah, so I will tap a little bit on the website here because actually I feel kind of glad you mentioned that. I built that website myself in about 6.5 hours. I've made a couple edits to it just in the agenda tab. I'm not real tech savvy, but I've got just enough information available to me that I can make some stuff happen. So,
Sure. And just
um,
because we've got just so much time together, and we can talk again, but do you have a primary between now and November 26th?
correct. Yeah, absolutely. And
Okay.
so on
When is that? Next May?
May 19th of 2026 will be the
Okay.
primary for the U.S. Senate race in
Okay.
Kentucky.
Thank you. And to focus in on what piqued your interest or curiosity in the letter that I sent to you today.
Well, mainly that it was supposed to be based on my reading of the letter. Somewhere around 23-ish% is supposed to be going to small businesses, federal government contracting, and that in reality it's more like 3%. So to me, that's huge,
Yeah.
especially being a small business owner myself and a company that provides a service that is actually a very big outfit within the U.S. government because I've got Fort Knox just down the road. What we do is service Black Hawk helicopters. So, and I've been doing this for 20 years. Now, my company is only 3 years old. Prime Hawks is not very old, but I house all of the intellect to basically comply with any of their federal contracts. And the network of men that I use to build the aircraft that I build now for the civilians, which do the wildland fire and utility construction, I could apply that to a federal government contract and save them money.
Have you
Uh,
tried applying for a federal contract?
well, here's the thing: that specific contract is not available until 2026. But I have created cage codes. I've gotten QRR numbers or whatever that you're supposed to have to contract with them. But then recently they've come out with new laws that says, you've got to comply with all this other administrative stuff. And they're saying, hey, well, we want to cut all these administrative costs. Well, you've got to quit putting those administrative duties on those small businesses, and asking them to comply with these large administrative batches of information. It's like the best thing you can do, call the company, see how much they want for the services, set a term for it, whether it be year, 2 year, 5 year, if it's an IDIQ, whatever. Set that price in mind, set up a payment scale, and start servicing the contract. Now, granted, you want people drug tested. You want to know they have a standard operating procedure. You want to know they have a quality assurance. I get it. That's easy. But it's all the extra. It's the invasion of your private company, which goes beyond saying, hey, sir, I have this problem. I need you to fix it. How much is that service going to cost? It's beyond that. They want your bank statements. They want to get into your bank account. They want it. Why? Why do you want to be in? I mean, I'm going to provide you a service for a fee. That's it. That's it.
Yeah, and to to help you sell yourself to your constituents, Mike, your um your website and all that you've told me in these first maybe 15, 20 minutes. I don't have my glasses on right now. I'm not going to put them back on. I don't know how long we've been talking. Um, is going to get sharper the more that you campaign, the more that you are interviewed to this end. I could see you improving a little what's on the site in terms of what's already there is basically what you've told me. Like these are the issues, and you broadly describe the problems. You might describe the problems with a little more specificity. You might list how each of those and I'm glad that you've just got, I think, 4 or 5 areas of on your agenda. More than that would be too much. But in those 4 or 5, if you listed how this hurts your constituents very specifically, and then also listed this is what you're going to do about it. And all we're asking at the American Small Business League is that you read my letter again and again. We talk about it as much as we can here so that you comprehend, you can evaluate, do you want to bring our agenda, problem, mission, message into your campaigning? Would it excite Kentucky to send you to Washington to clean up this, and this, and will our issue of the federal contracts be one of your top 4 or 5? You don't know now because you're just discovering us, etc. Um, we've written to as all the candidates we can find in both parties, and many like you are saying, "I've never heard this before. If this is true, this is outrageous." Basically, it's a very controversial accusation that we at the American Small Business League are making that the SBA falsifies compliance with the 23% goal. 23% of all federal contracts are supposed to go to small businesses. And like I wrote you, and like people can find on our website, we say that in reality, only about 3% of all federal contracts are actually going to legitimate small businesses. So that means every year, Bruce, when the SBA and the federal government, or when Google, if you look it up right now, when it says we exceeded the goal last year, 25 or 26% of federal contracts went to big businesses. All that's wrong, Bruce, and only the American Small Business League is right. I'm saying yes, because on our site, you'll find the documentation of 30 years of congressional investigations, SBA Inspector General reports, and our 100 plus legal victories that pulled out of from lawsuits and Freedom of Information Act information, this consensus opinion, evaluation, and analysis that the SBA is falsifying compliance with that goal. Now, will that be the best thing for your candidacy or the worst? We won't know, and you won't know unless you road tested it to see. So, just like you gave me the big picture, and I thank you for your candidacy, and everybody watching and listening, getting to know you, I hope are as intrigued by your authenticity and integrity as I was by our phone call and by what I saw on your website and by this brief conversation now. But I hope equally so you and everybody watching and listening will wrap their minds around it, because what we want to do in the next year and a half is have 10, 15, 20, 30 Republican candidates, Democrat candidates for the House and for the Senate talking about this,
Yeah.
challenging this and bringing it forward, and then obviously challenging the sitting members of the House and the Senate, especially the members of the Senate Small Business Committee and the House Small Business Committee, and especially Ms. Kelly Loeffler, the Small Business Administrator, and even President Trump, who's doing and saying a lot, supposedly to help the economy, to supposedly help manufacturing, supposedly to create jobs. But every time they talk about the SBA through your lifetime in mind, most people would say the SBA gives you loans. You can go to the SBA, and that's where you can get
No, they
loans
do not.
for business, or maybe some coaching on how to succeed in sales and
Right.
marketing. And rarely mentioned is this contracting program, which is the biggest mission purpose for existence for the Small Business Administration, created in 1953 by the Small Business Act to steer. Then it said a fair portion of federal contracts. Within a couple of decades, it evolved into being 23% of all federal contracts. And here's my conclusion about all this. What does it matter? That is about $345 billion in business every year, that most of it's now going to big businesses. They're big. They don't create one new job to perform those contracts because they're big businesses.
Yeah.
But if it went to our small businesses every year, America's small businesses would have to create about 2 million new jobs to perform that work, which
Yeah.
would balloon the economies of all the local communities where those businesses are and where those jobs get hired, and all the services that have to support all these new employees and all the new families that presumably would get created on top of the 2 million new jobs that America typically creates every year. That's what's massively That's the massive potential for a candidate for the Senate like yourself and anybody running for Congress anywhere around the country.
Right.
So
Yeah,
that's the
I exactly understand what you're saying, because ultimately that money being the 300 billion, what that can do for the families who are struggling, right, or that do have small businesses, for them to be able to hire, like you said, sometimes even bringing in folks who are just new to the workforce. I mean, that in itself is big, because just I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, like in the state of Kentucky alone, only 54% of the workforce was working. Why is that? Well, there's only going to be, in my opinion, it's got to be one of two issues. Either whoever's hiring is not paying more than the welfare check, or the job doesn't exist. And maybe there's the component of laziness, but I don't believe that. I think what we have in this state, especially, is this relationship with Mitch McConnell, right? where he's brought in all of this federal money, but he sold our stake to the federal government. You know what I'm saying? And he's had a stranglehold on Kentucky's economy in the Senate. And he doesn't want people working, obviously, because he never did try to get with this, what seems to be local legislators to enforce these people to, if they're on welfare, A, get a job, B, excel in the job, C, once you excel in the job, you make more money. You have a better promotion. You have a better spot. You've got a little bit more responsibility. It's self-reliance. It's, basically being 100% merit-based. That's where we need to return to. That's the only way any of this is fixed. And small business is the key to that.
Amen. And what else could I possibly tell you, Mike, to empower you with this as a potential issue that you might bring front and center to in your campaign?
Well, if you look at, I know you've seen the site in the agenda tab. There's the four main reasons, and that talks about the judges, the COVID era policies, the school, children's parental rights for school choice, and the healthcare. If you were to scroll down a little further, there's about six other things. The farmers of the state, and the small business are another couple items listed. So small business is something I'm definitely interested in, compounding a lot of power and energy into, because I'm a small business, right? I only employ 4 people. So, but we go nationwide. I mean, we go to Australia, go to Chile, Portugal, and we fix these helicopters. And we're all over, anywhere from Kansas to California, and every state in between, repairing these aircraft. It's a niche industry, but there's a need for it. Now, what hurts a business like me is, like you said, those big companies, because they can underbid me because they have some voluminous contract that they can take these losses on and cut me out, right? So I don't want to be underbid. I want it to be a fair wage for the men and women who are investing their time in their craft, and they need to be paid their value. And a federal government contract on a small business aspect would be, for my company, huge. I mean, I make good money. The company makes great money. The men that help me make great money. But what it would do for us would be life-changing for everyone involved, because that means all of the people that I have here now who are subject matter experts in our field, I then get to make them leaders, in their own sense, and draw in more talent and hire those people, and then share that knowledge to those newcomers, whether it be non-rotary wing aviation qualified mechanics, or folks that are coming out of maybe high school or college and they want to learn aviation, but they don't have the money to go to school for it because it's going to cost them 50 grand in 4 years, right? And it's expensive, and they need to get loans or they need to get grants, and they don't know how to do it.
Right.
I'll just hire you. Look, I'll pay you a decent wage. I'll train you to do the job. Come in and have some integrity, work with some merit. I'll train you to be a qualified A&P mechanic. And then if you run off and find something better than what I can offer you, I say, God bless you. I think that's the way. You got to look out for yourself, So, yeah, I'd be glad to, uplift these issues that you're seeing at ASBL and make it a piece of the agenda.
Yeah, and study them. And I wish you certainly the best. As you improve your website a little bit, so that that's where any Kentuckian can see, like, these are the problems. I didn't even know we had these problems. These are the solutions. I didn't even imagine that I should want or could have these solutions if we send Mike to Washington. A whole other aspect of the contracting uh, condition is, how easy or difficult is it for a small business to even find out what contracts are available and how do I apply for them? That's not our focus. But as much as I've looked into it, that's an equally gigantic problem, because if you just go to the SBA.gov and start clicking into that, it's, to me, if I remember a couple times I did it, it takes you off into these other pages, other pages, other pages, and I've lost the thread of what am I looking for? I'm trying to find what contracts could I bid for, and how do I apply to be awarded a contract.
Right.
So I think that's quite intentionally a mess, after the decades that we know about, that big businesses have the whole situation locked up. And
Yep.
anybody who says can define that much better than I just did and propose a decent solution for it, I think is going to get a lot of wind at their back, you know?
Yeah.
So I want to stay in
Well,
touch and encourage you to, call or write anytime as you develop these things. If you need any information, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I found the same issues you found that you just explained with the SBA, and even these federal contract awardings, right? You can get online and see who got them all, right? All day long, it's easy to say, this contract number or whatever, this company, how many contracts did they get? But the issue is, what do they want to see from you as a small business to provide you with that government contract? So, there are companies out there, and fortunately, I had a couple reach out to me, and I did latch onto one, and they're the ones that created our entire SBA profile through just the conversation like you and I are having, because they understand the paperwork better.
Hmm.
So they have a job. There's an entire company dealing with just trying to help small businesses deal with federal contracts, but they will not get you a contract. There is no guarantee.
No, no, but I'm going to ask you, I'll follow up, or please make a mental note. Email me what you can about such a resource that helps people apply for a contract or learn what does it take to pursue a contract. Please, Mike, send me that stuff.
Yes, sir.
And you mentioned that you can find who's been awarded contracts. We have found in 30 years of legal battles and freedom of information requests, it's like pulling teeth to find out who was awarded a contract as a small business. So if you've got any sites or links and anything, please send me, what makes you say or how you had a good experience in finding out who got those contracts, because we've had epic legal battles to just find out
Yeah.
what small businesses were given this contract, Mr. Pentagon. And 7 years later, and almost $1 million in legal fees. You know what we got? We got 8 or 9 or 15 pages completely redacted, just sheet after sheet of big black blocks. They do not want us to see that what they're calling small businesses are Boeing, Raytheon, Verizon, some of the biggest companies in the world. That's been
Correct.
our experience. So send me, please, any and everything
Yeah.
you have along these lines.
The only way I was able to access that information, like I said, was engaging in a contract with a company who was like
Okay.
headhunting that information, and
Wow.
they're paid, as employees to research all this data, but they keep it on their own in-house portal. So it's not
That's
public record, although it should be.
Thank you. Well, you know what? It used to be until in the 90s and the early 2000s, we started winning so many things that publicly available online information that we used to bring to court, it's not accessible to Joe Citizen anymore. And what is that an example of? The lack of honesty, accountability, and transparency that we, the people, demand. And here's another thing I loved about everything on your website. Woven into it was a teaching and an appreciation of first principles, the right relationship between the citizens of a democratic republic such as ours and the obvious servitude of our representatives, illustrated by a great quote from George Washington. So you pushed a lot of my buttons, the things I'm so passionate about,
Good.
our forgotten history, and how a candidate like you, which I thought came loud and clear through your website, Mike, really spoke to, I'm going to say, eternal foundational things that could help resurrect this country. You mentioned the USA Patriot Act as the source of the TSA and its
Security director.
enslavement of
Yeah.
mere travelers. You and I could have long conversations about, does America exist if we don't live under our constitutional rights?
Right.
So this really is a dragon to slay. It's everything that is standing on the throat of our rights, and there's tons, and all roads kind of do lead to the federal government. And you are so right in framing so many things as separating the proper distinction of what's really federal authority, what was reserved to the states, and what is still in my hands, and how can it not be encroached by an arbitrary bureaucratic ruling that stops me from getting on a plane.
Right.
I'm getting a little excited here.
And not only that, for not for being violent, not for being not paying for a ticket, not for not paying my taxes. It was for the fact that I couldn't play the game that they had in place, you know? So,
Well, anyone who knows history, it's every one of those encroachments that we don't stand up to. Eventually, they're rounding us up on the boxcars.
yep, that is correct. I do appreciate that, Bruce, for sure.
Any last thoughts, questions, or comments, Mike?
No, I thank you for your time. I look forward to further discussion with you on this. I will, glean that data a lot closer. But I definitely like what I seen there. And like I said, that eye popper was that 20% deficit in what is actually factually being given to the small business of this country. So yeah, we need to change that. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Mike Faris, running for Senate in Kentucky. FarisForSenate.com to be continued. I want to thank you very much, Mike. And I want to thank everybody for watching and listening today.